Welcome to the Human Conversation podcast with Jules White, the real dragon slayer, author and entrepreneur sales coach. Tune in weekly for human conversation about business and sales. Enjoy business expert interviews, educational episodes, and virtual cuppers with entrepreneur business owners. So grab yourself a cuppa and enjoy. Here is your host, Jules White.
So welcome everybody to the Human Conversation. Oh my goodness, my favorite thing that I do is my podcast. I love it. And today I am definitely going to love it. I have an amazing guest called Shelley Wilson. A lot of you who listen to my podcast will know this lady. She is an amazing author. I mean, listen, she's written 21 books. I can't even get my breath. It took me a year to write one book. So this lady knows all about writing. She's now coaching, mentoring, all around that writing journey. I can't wait to have this human conversation. Shelley, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Jules. Thanks, Jules. I think once the floodgates open, that's it. I can't stop writing now. I've got too much to say.
But it's incredible because anyone out there who is either starting to write a book, wanting to write a book, or has written a book, they know actually it's not just a little thing that you get up and do one day, you know, it's quite a big thing. It took me a year, as I mentioned, to write my book, and halfway through I said I was going to quit. So, you know, I've had a very interesting writing journey, but I wouldn't have changed it for the world. Now I've got a book in print because it's an amazing achievement. It really is, you know.
Holding it in your hands for that first time is just the most magical experience ever. And I always say to my clients that they have to record themselves. Either they self-record or they get somebody to record them opening the either the packet or the box, whatever it is, for the first time. And a lot of them say, "Oh no, I don't want to do that." And I was like, "I promise you will thank me." And every single, those that they hate being on camera, some of them, and then they'll look back and it's just, you can't, that joy, you know, you can't bottle it, and it's just amazing. And so yeah,
it is it's a creation, you know. You've
yes,
created this, but you put your heart and soul into it. And I do want to talk about the writing journey, but before we go there, I always ask my podcast guests one question to start off our amazing conversation, which goes wherever we want it to go. And that is, what was it that you wanted to do when you left school?
Oh gosh, that's a fabulous question. So I would have loved to have been a librarian.
You couldn't have been, because you're not quiet enough, Shelley.
I know. I think the universe was nudging me like, absolutely not, go into hospitality instead.
Brilliant.
But yeah, that little girl that went through school, always wanted to be an author, didn't have a clue how, but just to be surrounded by books would just be, yeah, fabulous.
Oh, so it was really your first love then?
100%. Yeah, always has been.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's brilliant. Because sometimes when you ask people, they'll say something like, well, I wanted to be a hairdresser, but I ended up an accountant, or whatever, you know, like these opposite ends of the scale. But actually, you did genuinely see and believe that you would be an author one day.
Yeah, I was writing books when I was 10 years old, and I was illustrating them, and then I was binding them in random wrapping paper and all sorts. So yeah, it was definitely what I wanted to do.
I love it. What was your first job, though, in order to actually get to that stage of being an author?
I used to clean toilets at a hotel up the road.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Means to an end, though, I'm guessing, yeah? Just to
100%.
earn some money.
It got me.
Yeah?
It was one of those, you know, back in the day where you used to get your pay packet in a little brown envelope and it was cash. It was that. So I used to go straight to McDonald's and buy myself a hot apple pie and a hot chocolate with my wage every Sunday.
That's brilliant. Absolutely. Aren't these stories wonderful from when you're young? So listen, when was the first time then that you were able to actually do something that was the start of that journey or connected to being an author?
I think through my teens, again, I used to have the old-fashioned typewriters. You remember, with the carbon paper and the whole shebang? I used to, yeah, tick, 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 tick. And I used to do all sorts and try and submit them, again, not having a clue how to do anything. Didn't get anywhere, obviously, because I didn't have a clue. Then probably when I had my kids and they were younger, I started sending letters to magazines, and I'd win a few of the star prizes. And they'd be in everything, like, the psychologist magazine, or the woman magazine, or there was a parenting magazine. I read like vicariously. It was whatever I could get my hands on. And so I started to kind of work out how to appeal to whoever it was that was digging through the letters to get you published. That hook, I guess. And
Yeah.
that taught me an awful lot. And then again, I probably late 20s, maybe, early 30s, I got a role to help be an agony aunt on one of the women's magazines
Oh, I love
for
that.
6 months. It was amazing. It was amazing. And that taught me like how fast paced journalism, that kind of thing is, because I'd literally get an email from the editor going, here's a letter from the box. Can you have this back to me by 4 o'clock tonight? And so I'd read the letter, I'd think about my response to whatever that it was like a Dear John letter, it's one of those like agony aunt page letters. And then I'd send it straight in. And I was one of the ones that got the most responses printed because I got the turnaround. And that taught me so much about, right, you've got to be on it. It's got to be fast. You've got to be there. Visibility again, really.
Yeah. So that's kind of a different writing to then sitting down and starting to construct a book and a story.
Yeah, that came much, much later. I think I got married, obviously had the 3 kids. I was tootling around with these little letters, but don't you, when kids are around, there's not much time for anything else, is there? And when they were 2, 3, and 5, I got divorced, so it was just me and them, and it was full on. So the writing took the back seat. One thing that I did manage to do was revive my reading, and I think that was what then reminded me how much I loved stories and just losing yourself. And for me, it is a massive escape, both writing and reading. And I just kind of started again, doodling just little stories. I'd write the kids some stories. I'd do all those kind of things. I'd put them in, like, so the parenting magazines again, I'd back on them and getting pictures of them holding like all sorts of things up, and that was fun. But it was doing National Novel Writing Month, which is in November, for the first time. 11 years ago now, 10 years ago. That was when it was, right, this is a book project. This is 50,000 words. You've got to sort yourself out. And yeah, and that was kind of when I got into, right, you can write a book. It is possible, and just go for it. And then that was it. Then I've not stopped since.
Before we talk more about the whole book writing, Shelley, I just want to touch on the fact that you actually had your own business at some point, which was, I think, in beauty therapy.
It was holistic therapy, yeah. Yeah, it was a spa. So I launched that in 2008. I finally left hospitality, no more scrubbing toilets and working in conference and events. I'd gone to night school and retrained, and then worked on the night when the kids were in bed, and obviously kept my day job, and just transitioned slowly to, right, drop a day until I could take it over. So yeah, absolutely loved that business and ran it for 7 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then something actually stopped you from running it going forward.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I, I was bitten by something like a spider or a bug or something when I took the kids out on like a bit of a ramble, as you do. And it was the weirdest thing in the world. I kind of woke up and my entire body was just a rash. I was just a walking rash, but it was hot and I couldn't wear. So my tunic that I used to wear for my spa, I couldn't wear trousers because it was irritating me. I have to wear skirts, and my clients saw it and they were like, "This is, oh my God, have you Googled it?" All the usual things. Gone to the doctor, they didn't know what it was. I had lumbar punctures, I had MRIs, I had blood tests. But what was happening was, it was almost like, felt like my body was shutting down, and it was just horrific. I've still got a few things now, so I feel like I've been plugged in and left on standby. That's the only way I can describe
Yeah.
the vibration in my legs. And so this was what, 2016, 2015, 2016. It's been a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, it got so much that I could barely keep my eyes open. I'd wake up one day and one of my arms wouldn't work, which is no good if you do massage or reflexology or anything.
No, no.
And it was a heartbreaking decision, but I kind of rounded the kids up. I was like, look, I can't do this. I was stressing myself out more and more. And I made the decision I'm going to have to close. And all of my clients, you know how they become family sometimes, don't they, in that kind of a situation?
Yeah.
And every single one of them said to me, I think the universe is nudging you down your rightful path. You need to write your books. And that was what I ended up doing. Yeah, I switched. The hobby became their full-time job.
And I'm really sorry that you had to go through that in order to then get back on the right path, let's call it. But ultimately, isn't it interesting, those stories that we have, in our lives where, you may be superstitious, you may say, it's the universe, you may say, I don't know, you may believe in a greater something that makes these things happen. It doesn't really matter. But when you look back at anyone's career path and what's happened in their past, then usually you can sort of plot out where their directions suddenly changed and things that made those directions change. And that's what I find really interesting about just this podcast alone, is speaking to some of the people on my podcasts and what led them to do the things that they either now do today, the successes they've had, the books they wrote. It's super. I love this.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted to make sure the listeners knew some of the things and challenges that you've had, and you've had many more. But I think what's really lovely is now that put you back on that path of writing. Thank goodness for all of us that happened. And from there, then you're starting to sort of go back to what you love ultimately, what you really love from when you were a child.
I think the ultimate dream of that little 8-year-old girl was, I want to write for a living. Wouldn't that be lovely? Like the authors that I was reading back then. And obviously I was watching my mum and dad reading, mum was on the Danielle Steele books and dad was on the Wilbur Smith books. And I was like, I want to be those people. I want people to be picking my books up and reading them. And I knew that back then. I just didn't know how, but I knew that that's what I wanted in my life. And so it's kind of, I think things like Sliding Doors, the film Sliding Doors, where there's two different realities, isn't there? And I think
I love it.
Our lives are very much like that, but which route? And do you get to a crossroads? Do you keep going? Do you go left? Do you go right? Walking the road, all of that. I just think it's just such an adventure, life is, and that we have got, as you well know, so many stories to fill up that roadmap. It's
so many stories. So we'll go back then to the fact that you'd entered this competition, which was to write a novel of 50,000 words. Shelley, my book was, I think, just over 30,000 words and took me a bloody year. I know I've told the listeners that 3 times. So I'm sitting here thinking, oh my goodness. And what was the timescale for you producing this novel, Shelley?
It's 30 days.
Oh my goodness.
Days. Yeah, 30 days. It starts on the 1st of November. It finishes at midnight on the 30th of November in your time zone. It's an American thing, but you literally log your word count every day. There's a graph on the site where you can see your word count going up. You get a sticker, like virtual stickers, when you hit 5,000 words, 10,000. So I love anything like that. I'm just a nightmare. Sticker, exciting. And then at the end, when you hit it, you get a certificate you can print out. This year will be my 10th year doing National Novel Writing Month, and I have hit 50,000 8 times.
Oh my goodness, that's just incredible.
Doable.
That's incredible.
And this is a really, really bad first draft, by the way. This isn't like, publishable quality.
Yeah. But it's writing.
Just sitting your bum in the chair and writing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that, sorry, I've just remembered at the beginning we were going to introduce you as the word nerd. So I'm going to make sure I put that in now, because I think that's a good place to put it. But actually what's interesting is there's this kind of accountability attached to this competition or, initiative, whatever you like to call it. And I think that's really interesting as a topic when you're thinking about writing a book. So let's not mix this up. Let's put this into some order for our listeners, okay? Because the listeners here, hopefully they listen to all our podcasts anyway, but if they're particularly interested in writing a book, and they're right at the start of their journey, which is ultimately where you totally need to be connecting.
Oh, yeah,
Shelley,
love
that's what she
that.
loves.
Love that. That's my niche.
Let's think about an order of things here, and the things that are these typically great things to have in your journey as a writer. Let's start at the beginning. What's that first, apart from connecting to you, Shelley, and the links will be below, what's that first thing that any aspiring writer should start thinking about?
The idea. What is that idea? Our heads are full of all sorts of things, and some of it's nonsense, absolutely, which is fine. But if you have always wanted to write a book, it will have been in your head some way, shape, or form. It might be a tiny seed that just niggles. It might have roads and worlds and all sorts of things. It might just be a question your client asks you over and over again, where you go, I really should write this down. I really should write this down. It could be just the tiniest seed. That is your starting point. And I always get anyone who works with me to kind of write that down. Just write your idea down. Whatever. Nobody else needs to see it. Just almost vomit words onto the page. Just write down what it is you want to do. What's the book about? If it's fiction, who are the characters? Where's it set? What's going to happen in it? Beginning, middle, end. Anything that you know about it, write it down. And I don't know whether it's this. There's a connection between the hand and the brain. So all of my mapping and planning of my books, whether it's fiction, non-fiction, whatever it might be, I have to do it pen and paper.
Yeah.
And then I type my manuscripts directly to my computer. But the planning stage is pen and paper and sticky notes and notebooks and coloured pens and all of that. But yeah, that's that first key point is what do I want to write? What is it that's so important to me? And then you can work out why it's important, who it's for, and all the other pieces put together then.
Yeah, and this is so nostalgic for me because when I had a wonderful writing coach who helped me write my book, and when she came she spent a day with me, and ultimately my first thing was, I just want to change how people see sales, and I knew that was like my headline statement. I hate how sales is taught. I hate the dialogue around sales. I hate it. And so I really, really want to change how people perceive and see sales. Yeah, so that was what I wanted to do. I never thought I'd write a book, if I'm really honest, but to be able to then think about how I could write a book about that was just magical. And in my front room we literally had post-it notes stuck to the carpet. I mean, I'm not even lying. It was such an amazing sight, and we were sat in the middle of it on the floor, and it totally created the journey of the book. And I can't tell you how helpful it was. You're right when you say this kind of physically doing it, writing things and using stickies and stuff and just mapping it out, but tangibly with post-its and stuff. Oh my goodness, it was absolutely groundbreaking for the actual format of the book. So I totally understand why you say that's where you start. So what next? What have we really got to start thinking about? Because also, are we talking about fiction or non-fiction, or does this really apply to both, Shelley?
It does in a way. There are obviously differences, but I write fiction. I also write non-fiction. The majority of my clients are non-fiction writers, but I do have fiction writers that are with me. It's the same tools and techniques I teach them until we get to a certain point. So the whole, what do you want to write? Who is your target audience? What do you want from it? What do you personally, if it's just to see your name in print, that's brilliant, that's fine. But if it's to stand on a stage and be a TEDx speaker, that's equally fine. So it's kind of knowing what your own goals are, working out the writing process. How are you going to fit this into your life? Because it is a big commitment and there is blood, sweat and tears. So you kind of need to do all of that, and then it veers in a couple of directions depending on the genre. So fiction, you're down your character development, you're down scenes and maybe research. Obviously, I went, as you know, I wrote a Viking novel set in 866 AD, which sent me on a massive historical researching trip, which I adored. But then with your non-fiction, there is a research element. Do you know everything, or do you need to outsource to add bits in? how is that going to be presented to the reader so that there's a flow and they understand it. So that kind of is where it splits off. But then you come back again to write it, edit it, publish it, and it's exactly the same. So
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
an awful lot of similarities in the whole process, but just with a little bit of a tweak in the middle bit.
And I guess, this accountability bit, which we've mentioned a bit earlier, just becomes really important. I used to have a monthly call with my book coach. And that
Yeah.
way, and actually I was doing all the writing, obviously. She would take the document and edit it, but not edit it. It was an edit in the sense of, I want to know more about this. What story
Yeah.
did you have that relates to this? And so it
Yeah.
was just expanding in my mind what I needed to tell the reader, because I
And
think
I do the
that's so
same.
important.
Oh, 100%, 100%, because you're so close to your own topic that you often miss bits. So when you've got somebody, and that's what I love about what I do, because I'll have writers who are in industries that I know nothing about, whether it's brand design or psychology or architecture, whatever it might be. And so I am literally reading this going, that blows my, I don't understand that. So I need a little bit more information. So
Yeah,
that's where it's really helpful to have that extra set of eyes.
yeah.
And you're absolutely right. I am not a professional editor in any way, shape, or form, as my editor will tell you. I love exclamation marks. I put them everywhere, and my
So
compound
do I.
sentences are a mess, and all of that. But what I do is in exactly the same way as your book coach did. It's that almost a critique, that almost, yeah, you're missing a little bit of gold here. And how
Mm.
about you? How are you going to get your story in it? Because that's where the golden nuggets are, if you like, of any non-fiction book. We want to understand people. If you're using it as a branding tool, especially, or a lead magnet, or even just a business card, that person, that reader, that ideal client wants to know more about you. So that's where your little bits and pieces of your storytelling comes in.
Yeah, and the storytelling piece is just magic, isn't it? That's the bit that's
Yeah,
the unique bit. I bang on about UHP all
yeah,
the time, your unique human proposition, but ultimately, no one else has got your stories. No one else will tell your stories the way you do. Even if it's a similar story to something someone else experienced, they're not going to tell it in the same way. And so that's pure magic, isn't it? And I think it's interesting what you say. We're so close to our topic. The big thing I think we do is we say, oh, people know that. I don't need to cover
yeah.
that. Oh, I don't want to repeat that because people have heard that before. No, stop that, guys. Stop it.
It's all been said before, I hear 300 times a week.
Yeah, yeah.
Not by you.
Exactly, exactly. And just that, you know yourself, and I know when I'm listening to a talk or I'm at a conference and it's a topic I already know, to hear someone else talk about that topic, there's always something they might say, and you think, "Whoa, I didn't think
Yeah.
of it like that." That's
Because
cool.
we all learn from different mentors, don't we?
Yeah,
I trawled through every possible how to write a book when I was, in my 20s and 30s. I went on Bloomsbury courses. I went to London and did weekends away, and I did so much to try and develop my own craft. And like you said, exactly as you say, they were all different authors, fiction, non-fiction, poets, big names, smaller names, agents. They all came at the same thing in a different way. And I learned so much from so many people and so many books. And I kind of mashed all that into my favorite bits. And that's then what I use to write my own books and what I teach people.
yeah,
But even that evolves, how I teach people now, depending on their abilities, their capabilities, their environments, whatever they might have, that's in their world. I have to match that. I have to write, okay, well, this won't work for you, so let's have a go at trying this way, and switching it up. And I love that. And I have conversations often with people who say, I can't write a book, I'm dyslexic. And I'm like, well, I beg to differ, actually, because there is a way you can.
yeah,
There's voice recording notes. There's so many ways that you can do it without having to stress out about that. And then you work with someone, these editors who are just amazing at what they do, who can put it into that format that makes sense to your readers. So there are no obstacles in my
No,
world.
no, and I think you're right. I think that attitude's good for life, actually. But there you go. But I think the editing bit, because again, you touched on the fact that you're not an editor. Well, my book coach wasn't an editor. What she was doing was she was just enhancing and giving me food for thought in my writing. When you come to the edit piece, then for me, this I think was the real magic of my book, because I had a great editor. And the editor I had did not lose my voice in the book. And so when people read the book, they said, "Oh, I could hear you
Yeah.
speaking to me when I read the book." And
Oh yeah, your book is 100% you.
and when I
Yeah.
read the book after he'd edited it, I was a bit like, "What? I don't know what he's changed." And he
Yes.
changed a huge amount in my book, a huge amount. And this is the subtlety of having a really good editor. And I would always say to
Massive.
anyone, I don't know what you think, but I think if you're going to invest some money, make sure that you get something like a good editor in that mix, you know?
Editors and cover designers worth their weight in
Yeah,
gold.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly
Yeah.
that. So we've talked about obviously the starting point. We've talked about non-fiction versus fiction, and I love how you took us down a little the character analysis journey. You have this amazing camper called
Snoopy.
Snoopy. So
Snoopy, my VW camper.
yeah, how long ago did you get Snoopy now?
Um, 4.5 years ago, if you can believe it.
Wow,
I know.
amazing. And
Yeah.
what I've always followed Shelley, I've known Shelley for quite some years now. Well, if your camper's 4 years, then I've known you for 6 or 7 probably.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I've always followed your little journeys in Snoopy, but the reason I'm mentioning Snoopy is because I feel like it's an essential tool for your writing, because you take yourself off to environments and locations, don't you, to feed your writing? Tell us
Yeah.
more about that, Shelley.
I'm a big believer in filling your creative well. And I think anyone who struggles with burnout or anything like that, they know that when they hit that brick wall, nothing happens, does it? And that can happen when you're writing a book. You know, it's a big thing. And it doesn't matter whether it's fiction or non-fiction, it's a big task to do. And you need to have the right environment. And sometimes that can literally be, I can't write it at home. The kids are screaming, the dog's thrown up, you know, whatever that might be. I'm going up the road to the local coffee shop. It can be as simple as that. And I have done that, you know, many, many times. But with Snoopy, it's part of it is research. It gets me to go and, you know, everything is pretty much accessible on Google, isn't it? So I could have sat here and I could have Googled everything about Northumberland and Alnwick and all of, you know, Lindisfarne and all of that. I could have Googled that. It's not the same as standing looking at the North Sea, imagining the Vikings coming over the horizon. It's just, it adds another dimension. As a writer, you can literally, I can sit there and kind of just breathe in and I'm there. I can literally see it happening. I can smell the waves. I can, you know, feel the sand in my toes. And I think that that comes through in the writing when you can kind of really put yourself in that
Oh
position.
yeah, amazing.
So yeah, I use him as research trips to go all over, and also as almost like mini writing retreats. So if I know I've got a deadline coming up, or I know I just need space, you know, fresh air, water, green space to go and write, I'll put my laptop in the car and I'll just go and have a few nights away, and I
I
love
love
it.
that. I love that too. I think I'm going to get a camper one day. It's always been a little vision for me. So I could see
Yeah, I
myself
remember you
driving a
sitting
little
in
camper.
Snoopy.
Yeah, when you came to see
More
me at
like
Milton
this.
Keynes, that was amazing. And that coast is just raw, isn't it? So it must be
Oh,
wonderful to go
beautiful.
there and feel the way you feel and write
Yeah.
your books. So 21 books. Tell us a little bit more about your books, Shelley, and what you've actually written in 21 books.
Yeah, sure. So my first book was 10 years ago. So that was this year was my anniversary of the 10 years as an author. And that was a blog to book project. So I was still working in my spa back then. And the audience were the ladies that were coming to my spa who were just like, oh, I wish I could do this and I wish I could do that, but I haven't got time. All the excuses we give ourselves. And I kind of thought to myself, do you know, all I've ever wanted is to write a book and I'm not writing it. So how am I going to show my clients that they can do anything they put their mind to and do it myself so that I'm kind of walking that walk? And that was when I started blogging. And I just set myself a ton of challenges, wrote about them, targeted for my sort of spa clients. And at the end of the year, I turned that into a book, and it hit #1 in the bestsellers the following January, which just blows my mind.
Love it.
Absolutely blows my mind. And
Love
it's
it.
still my best-selling book now.
Oh, wow.
And non-fiction was never on my radar. So
No.
as an author and as a child, you know, the fictional books, the escape, that was always what writing for me was, I'm going to write a novel. So non-fiction never even entered until a journalist friend kind of said, you know, you've written this book. And that was that light bulb. Um, in that year, one of the challenges I did was my first NaNoWriMo, my first National Novel Writing Month, which is where I wrote my first novel, first draft. So it was part of that challenge. So I self-published How I Changed My Life in a Year, and then the next year I self-published my first fictional novel. So they came back to back. So one almost fed into the other, and then it was almost 2 books a year ever since. But I
Amazing.
alternate between fiction and non-fiction.
Oh, that's
Um,
so good. And actually, I imagine that's quite a skill to be able to switch from writing in that way, because it is different, as you say. There's certain
yeah,
things that are
yeah, of course
similar,
it
but
is.
to get into a fictional kind of mindset must be like, well, you can just do anything, can't you, really, with that? It must be
Oh,
so exciting.
100%. When I was writing How I Motivated Myself to Succeed, which was a kind of a follow on, if you like, it was all about motivation, all about mindset. And I was really struggling. I think that was when I was really like my illness was worse, my business was closing. So it was all happening around that time. And I was probably 30,000 words in, and I threw it all in the bin.
Oh,
And I just said, I can't do this. I said, how can I write about motivation when I can't even get myself out of bed in the morning? And my editor was like, "You are the bravest person I've ever met." So, which I then burst into tears, obviously.
yeah,
But what I did was I then wrote my werewolf novel, because it was so much easier to write as a fictional character running through the forest with werewolves and having adventures and doing whatever, than it was to deal with real life.
real life.
So I
Yeah.
still got a book done, but I had to go down a different route. And eventually something clicked, whether I, not fixed myself, but you know what I mean? I kind of came back round into the world. I got a little bit of my mojo back, and the motivation book literally downloaded into my head. So it
So,
came out.
so it came back, which is
Yeah.
actually something I think to mention, is that kind of patience piece, because I think we all have a different style of how we can write a book, and we're motivated in different ways. And I took a year, which was important to me to take that year, because if I hadn't, I think I would have written for the sake of writing, and probably it wouldn't have been as good, and wouldn't have been the right messages and the right stories, if that makes sense. I had to
Yeah, yeah,
almost write
100%.
when I felt like I could write.
Yeah,
So similar in a way to what you were saying, but just being very true, I think, to your writing journey was something
yeah,
that was really important to me.
yeah, yeah. It's all about authenticity, isn't it? Especially if it is like a non-fiction, for example, because might be the first introduction your clients have to you, and
Mm,
they want to know that what they're getting is the real deal.
mm.
And so, yeah, taking your time and understanding the process and your story and how it's going to help and what you want from it is worth the time and patience. Definitely.
It's really, I've just had something come in my head, and I'm very spontaneous, as you know, Shelley, and this is the human conversation. So if we were having a coffee, I would just suddenly say, I've just thought of this. Because when I was at school, I loved writing. I loved English. I loved writing essays. And as a smaller child, you got to write. It was story time writing, so you could make up your stories. It was much more enjoyable, wasn't it? And I got a story of the week at school, and it was the incredible adventure of Professor Mugwump Whistle. And I'll
Oh, I
never
love it.
forget this title, because it was just, well, I just loved the story. And it was ultimately, he'd invented a robot that actually then had human emotions. And so,
Wow.
but it was literally
A
two
little bit of
A4,
foresight there.
yeah, it was like two little A4 sheets. And actually, isn't it interesting? Because like that was what, the 70s stroke 80s.
Yeah.
I was already in the AI world.
You were. You were well ahead of everybody.
Which leads me really nicely on to a question, I guess, about how is AI affecting the writing world, Shelley?
It is having an impact. I was a stick my head in the sand girl when Chat first came out, Chat GPT first came out. And as you know, my kids are all in their well into their 20s now, and they're the ones that like, Mum, breathe, chill out, it's fine. And I'm like, no, the robots are going to kill us all. Oh my God. Very much the author and dystopian fan. Um, and then I kind of was seeing it on my feed, write your book using AI. And I was like, no, absolutely not. And I thought, well, hang on a minute. If someone comes up to me and says, why do I need if AI can write it for me? I wanted to have the answers to that. So I went on webinars, I did talks, I booked courses, I read every book I could find on ChatGPT and AI. And I'm a convert. I absolutely love it, but I would never ever let it write for me. And that is the difference. From an inspiration point of view, it's incredible. From a planning point of view, it can be really helpful just to think of things you hadn't already thought of, to help you get your target audience right or your ideal client. Brilliant. It all depends on the prompts you use. That's a massive deciding factor. But a few of my clients, some people will know exactly what the book title is going to be. Others will just put a working title there and it'll come to them as they're writing. But some of my clients get to the end and they're still not happy with their title. And so we use chat. We pop it into chat. This is a summary of the book. This is the target audience. Give us 10 examples. And 9 times out of 10, we get a decent list of possible titles where we can take a little bit of this, a little bit of another one, and make something that's actually brilliant from a keyword point of view and a category search point of view. So yeah, I am a massive convert. I now talk about chat everywhere. Everyone keeps asking me to go and do talks at networks, which I think is hilarious. My kids still just they fall over laughing when I have to go and do these. I've done a masterclass on it around writing your book and helping you sell it, because from a marketing tool, oh my goodness, I put in the summary of my books and say, right, can you give me 10 Facebook posts that I can use for promo? And it just spits it out to me in seconds. So it's things like that where I find it massively helpful. But writing it for you, no.
No, because we want, as we mentioned again earlier, this kind of, we want your voice in a book. And unfortunately, Chat GPT at the moment can't be your voice. Who knows in the future?
It's a very how is it? I read it was one of the webinars. It was brilliant. Imagine it's like Gary at the water cooler. He's a nice guy, but a little bit boring. And that's what chat is. You've got to find the really interesting people that are in the cafeteria.
Gary at the cooler, love that. The water cooler. Oh, that's just brilliant. And so look, I'm sure we could talk for a very long time about like writing and the whole author piece, but I wanted to make sure for the listener that we started to cover some of those basics, where to start, things to consider, non-fiction, fiction, AI just came in there, didn't it? Look, just came in the door. But I also, there's a lot to talk about around publish houses versus self-publish and the likes. Very quickly, let's just cover that off as to what your thoughts are around that. I did a hybrid publish, which is almost, it's not a publishing house per se, but you get that extra assistance on producing a more professional book. Let's sort of wrap it up like that.
Yeah, there are literally 3 ways.
Yeah, but that costs you money. So
yeah. And this is what you think about when you start off with your goals. What do you want to achieve from this? If you want to buy a yacht and live in the Seychelles, you don't write a book, you do something else, because you're not going to get the money for that. There is going to be an outlay if you're going down the self-publishing hybrid route, definitely. But on the other side, I've self-published and I've got a publisher. So I know it from both angles. I love self-publishing, absolutely love it, because I love the control, I love the freedom, I love doing what I want to do with my books. But equally, with my publisher, I'm very lucky that they are fantastic and they have all the financial, stuff, so I don't have to pay. They do it all. So there's lots of pros and cons. It's all about what you want to do with your book. So if you need something out, I'm speaking on stage in October 2025, self-publish, because you'll have it out by then. You won't if it's traditionally published. 9 times out of 10, it'll take 18 months to 2 years to get down that, because they've got
Wow.
so many that they're doing. So it's all tied to your goals,
Yeah.
really, as to which avenue to go. And there isn't a right or wrong. There isn't,
No.
publishing is great. If you can bag yourself a publisher, fantastic. That's worth celebrating. But self-publishing has come on leaps and bounds since it launched. And yeah, there are so many amazing people out there, typesetters, editors, graphic designers, everyone, like this hybrid team, if you like, who can help you.
Yeah.
So I think probably a little bit of advice I would give, if you are thinking about going down the self-publishing route, start funneling money away now.
Yeah.
Get a book budget and just start putting a few bits of pieces away so that you can get the best possible book that you can for what your money
Yeah,
is.
because I think a really important bit to add to that with that self-published piece is that when you've put your heart and soul into a book, and actually the book content is really good, if you produce it and it looks rubbish and it's not very
Oh, gosh,
readable and the cover's a bit,
yeah,
then actually people won't read your book. And so you've
exactly.
lost this big opportunity, haven't you? So
Yeah,
it's
we
quite...
do judge a book by its cover,
Yeah,
no
but
matter what you say.
we
We do. Yeah,
we do, and even part of the Business Book Awards is about the cover, to be honest, and
yeah,
I know that
yeah,
from being a
yeah,
previous entrant.
yeah.
So yes, so listen, writers out there, go grab your pens and your post-its and connect with Shelley and do that thing, because it is a lovely experience writing and producing a book. There's no doubt about it. And it does help you in your business. You're right. It won't make you rich. Certainly not unless your name's J.K. Rowling or something.
Yeah.
But we won't go there. But I think it's the accomplishment piece for me, was just being able to get my methodology and my thoughts into a book has just been super helpful from my perspective.
It
So
gets your foot in the door to your ideal clients
yeah,
a lot of the time.
yeah.
And, you've done your TEDx talks, if you've got a book out there and you're doing little talks or anything like that and workshops, then people are going to notice and they're going to see that as a massive part of your credibility.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
yeah, it opens doors.
most definitely. So just to finish off and wrap this up beautifully with a big fat bow, Shelley, what are you doing next that's actually really exciting in terms of anyone listening who wants to actually write that book? There's something
Yeah.
super exciting that you're putting together, isn't there? Tell us about it.
There is. Yeah, there is. So I work with people one-to-one, or I do group programs. And what I found was they came to an end, which they do, don't they? And then everyone was left to their own devices. And I found a lot of the time, we're going back to that accountability, they needed someone to kick them up the bum. And they'd often come back and either rebook with me. And I was like, hang on a minute, not lovely to have you back, but you should have written this by now. So there was a lot of that. And I realised there was a gap in what I offered. And so what I'm going to be doing is launching a membership. So it's going to be the Accountability Club for Writers, which will teach you everything you need to know. So there is the whole, how do you start? What's your target audience? All of that as well. But it's having somebody there to make sure that you're doing the writing. So that includes like group calls every month just to check in. Have you done your word count? Have you done your research? Whatever that might be. I've got guest experts that I'm recording. So editors, publishers, agents, all those kind of people to drop in there as well. So yeah, lots and lots of exciting things coming up, but hopefully it'll be exactly what people need to help them show up and get their books finished and published and out into the world.
Yeah, not only is it headed up by an amazing legend of an author, but equally you've got this community then as well of like-minded people who want to write a book or have written a book or might be
Yeah,
writing their second, third, fourth,
exactly.
21st book.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot to say about membership where you build that community side of it as well, which is just like nothing else,
It's very lonely writing a book.
Yeah.
Even if you
Yeah.
do take your laptop to the local coffee shop and you've got the white noise, it is still, you're in your own head for all of it. So having other people who get it and don't glaze over when you start talking about writing, that's what I want to achieve, and that's what I want to grow, definitely.
Brilliant. And just to add, Shelley has been doing more and more speaking. She has been on more and more stages at events I've been at, or on stage with me at times. And I'm not going to lie to you guys, she's an amazing speaker. So I'm just pushing her a bit further through onto her speaking journey, and telling you that if you ever need a great speaker about authors, books, chat GPT, she's brilliant, she's super fun, and she's very natural. So put her on your desired speaker list, and more to come, I think.
The mic.
Yeah, she loves the mic, she loves the mic. Shelley, thank you, darling. It's been an amazing chat. I knew it would be.
Thank you so much for having me. You know me, I can talk to you for absolutely days on end.
Yeah, we're a bit dangerous together, really, aren't we? But we haven't done too bad on this podcast, but I think we've delivered to anyone listening who's thinking about writing a book, or even in the process of writing a book and maybe a bit stuck. I think we've delivered a few little nuggets for them to think about, and some great advice. So I really, really thank you for that. And of course, an amazing human conversation, which is what this is all about. So we even had the dogs interrupting it, but I'm probably going to cut that out. I might leave it in. But listen, please follow us on whatever channel you like to listen to this podcast on. We're on Apple Podcasts, we're on Spotify, we're on SoundCloud, and we're probably on another 50 to 100 that get filtered out all over the place. But we would love you to like and even comment about what you'd like to know next on The Human Conversation. And thank you for spending some time with us, Shelley and I, and we'll see you next time on The Human Conversation. Ta-ta for now.
You've just been listening to the Human Conversation podcast with Jules White. To find out more about the other work that Jules does, please visit her website www.liveitloveitsellit.co.uk. And if you enjoyed the podcast, then please do leave a rating and review on the platform you use to enjoy her show. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.